This podcast may contain graphic and/or explicit content that may not be suitable for some listeners, especially kids like me. Listener discretion is advised.
You're listening to the Real Life Podcast, brought to you by the Thin Blue Line for Women. In this podcast, we open up and talk about real life issues as they relate to law enforcement. It's raw, it's real, and it's about time. I'm Tamara, your host. Thanks for joining me. Are you looking for Thin Blue Line gear? It's available on our website at thinbluelineforwomen.com. That's thinblueline4women.com. Show your support for law enforcement and get your Thin Blue Line gear today. Just click on shop at thinbluelineforwomen.com. Before we start this episode, I have some shout outs that I want to give that are very deserving. First of all, I want to thank some people who have been sponsoring this podcast monetarily. And I want to thank Ron, Katie, Paul, Kelly, and Anne. I sincerely appreciate your support. It will help in future episodes as I'm using a program that costs money. So I'm not making money off the podcasts at all. That's not what this is about. But I do appreciate the funding to use the program to record my guests on. So that's really awesome. Thanks, all 5 of you. Let's see. I have to give a good shout out to Kirbyville, Texas. Their criminal justice program is reading my book right now through my eyes. Mr. Davis is the head of that criminal justice program, and I'm supposed to say hello to all the kids in his class. So hello, everyone. I really hope you're enjoying the book. If you started it, I think you started it last week. It's sad. It's gross. It's, well, anyway, I'm just thankful that you're all reading it. I'm stumbling over my words because I'm trying not to cry. Every time I talk about my book, it makes me tear up just a little bit. Anyways, I also learned that a forensics, I think it's like a college, like an online course, or maybe it's not just online. Maybe it's a real place. I'll have to look into that more. But a forensics course is making my book a mandatory read, starting with the Academy next month. And I cannot believe that it makes me so happy that people are going to be reading the stories and understanding that law enforcement doesn't just go to a scene and leave and go to the next scene and leave. They actually have to stop and process these scenes emotionally because we're all human, and these scenes do stay with us for years and years and years. And so I'm glad that they actually have to read something like that. It's not, these classes are not just filled with, classroom work, and you're not just learning how to pour casts or fingerprint or, record evidence or book evidence. You're learning about your emotions, and you're learning about what it's going to take to get through all these scenes. So I'm really happy about that too. Okay, let me start listing some names of people that I'm really thankful for. And there's so many people. I can't even fit them all in. There's Ron Ferris, Julie Bailey, Ann Weddick, Cindy Ward, The Roll Call Room, and the Resting Mom Face podcast. Pat Yawn, Cammie, I Have Your 6, Keeping It Real, Lois, Alma with the yellow flower in her hair, Allison, Boomer, Carol Otto, Jason Lee, Johnny Socks, Griff Girly Girl, Sergeant Manders, who was just on an episode last week. She rocks. Katie, Susan in Seattle, Lori Reynolds, and Julie Bailey. So those are all my shout outs for this week. Enjoy listening to Sara, the 911 dispatcher. Here we go. Hello, everyone. We're being joined today by Sara, who used to be a 911 dispatcher and wants to tell her story about how she dealt with depression. So, hi, Sara, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine. Thank you for having me.
Can you just tell us really briefly, before we get into specifics, tell us how long ago you were a dispatcher? When was your very first dispatching job?
It was in 2009, so about 8 to 10 years ago.
Okay, how old are you right now?
I am 31.
Okay. Um, Did you always want to be a dispatcher, or how did your very first job as a dispatcher come about?
Well, I've always had an interest in law enforcement. That's because me and my dad used to watch cops all the time. And I I had the opportunity to apply for a small town job as a dispatcher. And I filled out the application, and a few months later I get a call, hey, are you still interested in being a dispatcher? And I was really excited. So I was like, yes. And that's kind of how that came about.
Gotcha. Okay. So, were you the only female in your, I guess, department or your 911 dispatch area?
Um, when I was hired, we had a part-time, she was female. She wasn't there for very long. And then there was another older female, and she worked during the days. So there was only, a couple of us. And usually how it worked, hardly ever would we be on at the same time.
Okay. So it sounds like you worked for a very, very small department. Is that correct?
Yes, the most officers we had were 6, maybe 7
Oh,
altogether.
okay. So when you were a dispatcher, you were also 911, you were dispatching. What other hats did you have to wear in this job?
So many, almost everything, unless I needed something, from my supervisor or something. I would be housekeeper, jailer, transport if we needed an extra person to go with the officer.
Jailer, you had a jail right there where you were dispatching at?
Yep, just a few feet behind me.
Wow. So you're talking maybe like an intake tank until they got transferred to a real jail, right? To a county jail or a city jail? Or was this where they
Dep-
actually stayed?
Depending on the charges.
Okay.
If they
Okay.
were like county charges, then we'd hold them until county come pick them up.
Okay.
But we did have municipal charges, so they would stay there 12 days, just depending on how much their warrant was for.
Okay. Wow. So you did play a huge role in that department. You were 911 caller, you were a dispatcher, a jailer, a janitor.
Yeah.
Wow, that's unbelievable. So tell me about the stress that went on in this job.
Oh, well, being the only one, especially at nights, I'd have 2 officers. At about 3 a.m., one officer would leave, so it'd be just me and another officer. So if,
And you're
I
talking about officer in the field, right? Driving around in the patrol car.
yes, yep.
Okay, so it was only you and that patrol officer in that whole city, right? Or
Yep.
was it the county?
It was city, but we
Okay.
did interact with 2 different counties
Okay.
um, where I was. So, but
Wow.
one night, like if the electricity went out in town, I'm the only one there, so I took over 100 calls by myself, and I'm
Oh,
trying to get out the electrician, and I can't because these citizens they keep calling. I'm like, I'm trying to find out.
oh. Wow. So you're actually the electrician for the town as well.
Yeah, like after
Gosh.
hours, if they needed something, certain questions, we'd have to wait till like city hall opened or anything like that. But we did have a book of like codes and ordinances and everything.
So what
So,
how long did you work in this particular position? How many years?
a little over 2 years.
And what made you leave? Like talk about the stress or the anxiety that you were going through. What was it that made you leave that job?
Really, I think because I was there constantly, and, we worked 10-hour shifts, then it moved to 12 hours when we got shorthanded. Um, and there for a while, I was starting to work like 16-hour shifts, 21-hour shifts, just because of the crazy calls coming in. And have to do transports and everything. So, you know, just the stress of being there constantly, I think, not really giving my mind that mental break that it needed because
Right.
I also live 2 blocks away. So
Oh gosh.
I
Well,
I
it
was
sounds
just
like you got burnt out.
I did. And I never knew what that feeling was, and it literally makes you feel like you're going crazy.
Oh, I bet. You have to
And
have time to de-stress and defuse and be you instead of a dispatcher. Go home and be a girl. Be Sarah. You
yeah,
never get that
exactly.
chance.
And that was hard to separate.
It is
And
hard to separate. I know what you mean.
yeah,
So so you quit that job and then you went on to what, another 911 job somewhere else, or tell us about that.
I did. I went to a county that was rather large, but the transition was not very good. Um, I still didn't realize I was burning out at the time. But just the people there, they just really weren't very welcoming and making the transition easier.
Okay.
Some things I was just kind of thrown in, like, hey. So I quit that one, let my mind kind of rest for a little bit, tried a different place. They trained me for 1 week, just 1 week, and put me on my own.
Oh,
And it
wow.
was completely different in that department than it was out, where the little department was.
Okay.
So,
So it was stressful, obviously.
yes, most definitely.
Do you think that you have I mean, I hate to throw acronyms at you, but like do you feel like you have PTSD, the post traumatic stress disorder that most people experience in departments or law enforcement fields? Do you have anything like that, or do you have any anxiety? Or I know you have depression, we're going to talk about that, but is there anything else that was going on in your life at the time that you didn't know about, and then all of a sudden you were like, oh, well, that played a role?
I think looking back now, I did have anxiety. And a lot of it, my mind would just overthink constantly. And so that didn't help any kind of situation either. And of course, being a dispatcher, my mind was always running, thinking, what if this happened? What if that happened? How would I handle this? How would I handle that?
Mm-hmm.
So, my mind really just wasn't quiet and I wasn't able to process very well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then over the years, it just kind of got worse from there. I'm not sure if I'm really have PTSD. If I do, it's very slight,
Mm-hmm.
but I've never been diagnosed with it.
Do you have anything else that could have caused what you were going through?
I think a lot of just, health, just regular health issues, may have played a role because it's like, oh, I don't know how to, fix this problem or anything like that. So just stress upon stress upon stress.
And then it caused you to go into a depression, correct?
Yes. And of course, I
Yeah.
battled depression, probably since before high school, even, but I was actually diagnosed during high school.
Oh,
And
okay.
so, but when I started working 911, it kind of progressed a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's a lot of negativity in the job, but there's a lot of positives too. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I was letting that negative get to me more than
Okay.
anything.
Uh-huh.
So, I wasn't processing that negativity like it should be.
Did you seek any counseling for your depression and anxiety?
I did. And I've seen counselors, off and on, but I never felt very comfortable with them because I
Mhm.
always felt like, they're judging me or whatever. But recently, I met someone, he connected me to his wife, and she is an absolute gem.
And she's a
She
counselor,
she is.
a
She is a
licensed counselor? Okay.
uh And so each week we get together and just talk and and this was just in the last few months because I met her I think around June of last year, but I have progressed so well with her that my mind's clear. I don't feel like I have to take medications. And so it's really nice. I feel free.
So you finally sought counseling just 6 months ago. You didn't even seek counseling years ago when all this is going on, right?
Correct.
Well, you didn't have time either. You said you were working 16-hour shifts. My gosh, you can't
Yeah.
even you wouldn't have had time to go seek a counselor if you wanted to. My goodness.
It was like working home, working home.
Right. Like there's no time for hobbies or, and that's a large part of the law enforcement field. Dispatch, 911, law enforcement, even fire. Fire lives there, for 24
Yeah.
hours a day. You've
Mhm.
got to have something else besides work, because I know work is fun sometimes. I know we all have our buddies at work and things like that. I get that. But still, the job is so hard sometimes and emotional and depressing. I mean, seeing a dead child, or even hearing, I mean, I can imagine the 911 calls you received, hearing
Mhm.
all of those things. You're hearing it happen. It's depressing. I mean, you have to have time to come off of that high, gosh.
Yeah. Like I would go home and sometimes like, I may have like a beer or, just kind of sit down, watch TV. And I would, instead of watching like, you know, shows with, dealing with crimes and everything, I turn it on to Disney Channel or Nickelodeon, watch cartoons or little
Okay,
funny shows.
that's funny that you say that. Have you read my book Through My Eyes yet?
Not yet. I'm actually still waiting for it to come in.
Oh, so you didn't get the ebook. You got the paperback. Okay. I
Yep.
talk about that in there. I say that when I got home from work at 3 o'clock in the morning, I would have to de-stress and come down off of my, 12-hour day by watching comedy shows
Hmm.
and, the Golden Girls. And
Yes.
I know I still didn't deal with what I was going through. I just pushed it away, but at least I can unwind and get my mind off of something else so I can sleep at that moment.
Yeah. Hmm.
So yeah, I know exactly what you mean by watching something completely different than what you're doing. That's funny.
Yeah. And something that doesn't have, your mind doesn't have to think, you just
Yeah,
watch.
right. Yeah, no thinking, just shut it off.
Yep.
Is there, I mean, tell me a story, if you have one, about a traumatic moment for you on the job, like one that still haunts you today. Because a lot of us do have that that one scene or a few scenes or a few moments that just still are with us right now. Do you have anything like that?
I do. There's a few, but one that really stands out. One night I received a 911 call. This female, she was just hysterically crying and everything. And of course, I'm kind of having to raise my voice so I can get her attention to calm her down. I'm just kind of saying, hey, okay, calm down a little bit, breathe, tell me
Mm-hmm.
what's going on, and she was like, well, my father can't breathe and everything. So, I'm like, make sure he's sitting up, his airway's clear and everything. So I told her, I'm like, I'm gonna put you on hold for just a second. And I made sure that she understood what I was gonna do because it was just me. I was like, I'm gonna put you on hold so I can contact the ambulance. Of course, I already had my officers en route by this point.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I quickly called them, uh, got back on the line with her. Everybody got there. But the next day, I came in to work and my assistant supervisor told me that her father didn't make it.
Oh
So
gosh.
yeah, so still in my mind, I'm like, okay, is there anything better that I could have done? Could I done something a different way? Of course, I know that that's not, I don't have no control over that. I know that
Uh-huh.
it's all in God's hands at that time. But my heart still aches for her, and it does. So like if I'm at work now and we get a call, oh, a patron's having chest pains, dep every once in a while that'll pop into my mind.
Oh, so you think about that back then.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, that's horrible. Ugh, I'm sorry you had to deal with that.
Oh, it's okay.
So what else triggers it? Is it just getting calls like that
Some
triggers it?
Sometimes, and honestly, my mind will just kinda bring it up, and I'll think about it for like a split second and just kind of think about something else. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sitting there dwelling on it.
Do you find that, because this happens to me and I want to see if it happens to you too, like sometimes you'll be watching a television show or even a movie and something will happen in there and it quickly brings you to one of your scenes or one of your calls or something and you're like, whoa, whoa, and it kind of catches you off guard and then you're like, okay, I'm fine, I'm okay. That happens to me all the time.
Yes, it does. Especially, we actually not too long after I started, we had a murder suicide. Luckily, I did not work that one, but I had to deal with the aftermath, media and everything like that. So, when I see, in the news or whatever, something about a murder suicide, it does bring that up. Um, I did see those crime scene photos. They're still in my head. Those will never go away. So I'll just be like, oh, okay, let's move on. We're all good.
Yeah, so hold on a second. You just said that you sometimes had to deal with the media. So you were the PR person as well for your department?
No, thank goodness. My boss, he was the public information officer. He is our jail administrator, and he's still there. He's been there for 20 years now. So, but if they would call the department, and so we'd have to give them his cell phone and be like, no comment. I'll need you to refer to, our PIO.
Right,
So
okay. Okay. Right, you had a tough job there. Now, a lot of people don't, well, I'm not going to say a lot of people. I worked law enforcement. I worked CSI for 15 of my 20 years.
mhm.
But I only sat up with 911 and dispatch just for a couple of days. That was part of our training because we had to see what they went through.
Uh-huh.
But I still didn't have to live it every day like you did. So tell us what it's like to actually hear somebody calling in. I mean, you are the first responder. You're the first one that person is talking to and dealing with when they're calling 911. I mean, you are it. You're the first one. Before cops ever get there, before crime scene investigators ever get there, they're talking to you. So, what is that like?
It can be overwhelming sometimes because, you know, things can happen in a split second. So you're thinking, okay, this call, okay, I need to send my officer first, foremost. They're going to go, okay, now I need to call this, this, and this. And, if I would get calls that weren't even in my jurisdiction for 911. So I relied on getting like landmarks and, okay, where exactly are you at? Give me,
Okay.
details and descriptions and things like that. So I did a lot of breathing deep breaths, to calm myself
Uh-huh.
while I was trying to calm them down. So that was a task in itself because, like, my heart would be racing and I'm trying to keep them calm, but keep myself calm as well.
Right, because you're a human being. I mean, dispatchers and 911 operators have to be that calm voice, right? To keep the
Yes.
other person calm. But here we are, human beings with a heart, with a soul, with an emotional makeup, and
Yeah.
it's like, do you ever find, or is it, maybe it's easy for you? I don't know. Is it easy or hard for you to sometimes, be very robotic and be very, by the book, by the textbook. Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to call this person. I know what to do. And then after you hang up, you're like, oh, fall apart.
Um, I
Or are you better than that? Or maybe that would just be me because I don't know if I can handle the 911 calls.
I think it just really would depend like on the situation that's going on. Like if it was a real major, afterwards I'd be like, okay, now I have to, get all this paperwork done, just to keep my mind from it and, finish the job that I needed to do.
Right.
But I learned to really cut off my emotions, and I think that played a big role. And so now, since I'm not doing that, it's my emotions are more raw because they're starting to come back out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, like,
So,
I figure at something so simple now.
so do you think by now that's a coping mechanism that we all have, Sarah. We learn to cut off our emotions so we can handle the job. So do you think that caused part of your depression as well?
I think it could have, in all honesty. I never really thought about it, but it would make sense because I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to feel anything. So,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
just gonna not feeling things and move on.
Right, exactly. And so now that you're talking to this counselor, you're talking through your feelings and you're owning up to them and you're coming face to face with them, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm basically facing all the demons from years, whether it's personal or work related, whatever. And, if I want to move forward, I got to conquer these demons and be like, you know what? It's okay. I tripped, I fell, I'm learning, and
Yeah.
I'm moving forward in a better way.
Right. Now, what do you do for a job now? Are you still a 911 dispatcher? What do you do?
I'm not, I am actually a security dispatcher for a casino. It's a fairly large casino, but we do interact with our tribal police department and 911 or 911, our tribal dispatch almost on a daily basis. Because the sectors for the tribal police department, they have their northern, southern, and all that, and their office for up north where I'm at is actually at our casino. So they'll come in and say hi and, just talk with us and things like that.
That sounds like a cool job. So how big is this casino? Like how many floors is it? Is it just one
Um,
big?
it's two, but the main like gaming floor is just the main bottom floor.
And
Or
you're the security dispatch. So there's security officers throughout the casino and you're their dispatch.
yes,
Okay,
and
gotcha.
and not only do we dispatch security, we take inbound, outbound calls. We have radios for every department in the casino.
Oh, good.
And so we dispatch every single one of them, plus, all the phone calls and everything.
Okay.
So it's a lot more than what the, little police department. And I think that's actually helped because of the call volume, learning to use my radio better and things like that.
Okay. Now, how are you handling life today differently than you did before to live a more healthy life? Like list some things that you're doing now. I mean, in addition to your counseling, what are you doing to live a healthy life today?
The main thing besides the counseling is, just praying to God, keeping him my focus, letting him control everything instead of me trying to control everything, because I've done that, doesn't end well ever.
So you have a relationship with God.
Yes.
We never talked about that. That's good. That's good to hear. I do too. And unfortunately, I did not call on God or lean on God as much as I should have during my scenes. And I wrote about that in my book as well. You'll read that I
Yeah.
wish if I can go back, I would lean on him more and and pray to him to take away all the haunting scenes and put me at some peace. And I didn't rely on him at all. I just shut down and just completely cut myself off.
And on all honesty, I did the same thing. I remember, praying here and there, but not really making him the main focus.
Right,
So that's definitely one of the biggest things.
right.
And now my mind's clearer, so I'm processing things better instead of just keeping it all bottled up and
Mhm.
everything. So I'm coping. I'm learning to cope.
There you go. We're always learning to cope.
Yeah.
What advice can you give anyone who wants to become a 911 dispatcher?
Main thing, kind of see where your mind's at before really starting, because it will take a toll. Um, make sure you learn to process, give yourself time away from the job. You know, don't make that just all you do.
Hmm.
Or you'll be like me and burn out very quickly.
Hmm.
Um, and just, keep that focus. You're there to, you know, be there for others and get them the help that they need as quickly as possible.
Hmm.
And as well as your officers, they're your main priority. Um, at least for me, my officers were my main priority.
Right.
And of course the callers calling in, of course, but if I didn't have my officers, then I what did I have? So I always tried to have a good relationship with them.
That sounds good. Sara, you've been such an inspiration. I really appreciate you coming on and talking to everyone about your depression and your job as a 911 dispatcher. I really appreciate your time, and
Oh,
thank you for being so brave as to, you know, coming forward and saying you were depressed and stressed and anxious, because not a lot of us like to admit that,
yeah.
it's not fun to talk about at all.
No, it's not.
So I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. And for those of you out there who are thinking about becoming a 911 dispatcher or just a 911 caller, I hope that you listen to what Sara had to say. And if you're anyone else, I hope that you now have a better understanding of what dispatchers go through. And thank you, Sara. I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much. Good luck with the future.
Thank you. And thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Join me next week when I talk with a mental health counselor about mental illness and trauma as it relates to our first responders. See you next week.